Hello friends, let's see how life originated on Earth. The Earth evolved around 4.5 billion years ago, but it took long enough for life forms to be created. Since the scale of the measurement of the universe and planetary origin is in billions of years, one can't say with utmost certainty about a given date and time for it. As you know that hundreds of millions of years after the initial Big Bang, the sun was still cooling down when life forms seemed to originate on planet Earth. Out of the different planets of our solar system, the planet Earth only was conducive enough for life forms to originate. The planet Venus is too near the sun, and the planet Earth too far away to support life forms like the planet Earth. All living beings require the element carbon, without which no life forms exist. In the early stages of the origin of life forms on Earth, this element might have come through the volcanic eruptions which were highly prevalent during that period of time. During that volatile period of the Earth's existence, many compounds and elements may have been created. One such thing was the amino acids which make up the proteins from which is referred to as the building blocks of life. Although the first forms of life was simple in build-up, later on complex life forms began to evolve. It is widely believed that heterotrophs were the first kind of life forms to originate on Earth. These heterotrophs use the organic material like amino acids that were created during various chemical reactions that occurred during that time. Also, the heterotrophs themselves were created from these organic materials. It is believed that the heterotrophic bacteria were the first form of life to originate on Earth. As life forms began to reproduce and multiply, the organic material began to become insufficient to be used as food to them. Around 3 billion years ago, autotrophs, which produce carbohydrates and oxygen using carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight, began to emerge. Thus, oceans began to be filled with oxygen. To make use of this, aerobic organisms began to emerge, which takes in the oxygen and break down the carbohydrates to release energy. It was around this time pathogens began to emerge, which used the resources of other organisms to survive. As more and more organisms began to emerge, there arose a competition to survive. The most notable event in the origin of life was the emergence of protists. These organisms were unicellular in structure, but they were comparatively bigger in size, some even being visible to the human eye. Unlike other organisms, the protists contain cell organelles. Basically, protists are unique because they possess a nucleus which contains the genetic information of the cell and alias the organism. Previous species were simpler in their nature and did not possess such a complex cellular structure. These organisms possessed a distinct cell nucleus and contained organelles within its cell structure. One other important aspect of the up and coming species was the existence of mitochondria, the site of ATP creation in human cells. Mitochondria is present in both plant and animal cells in today's world. Mitochondria originated even before the time when distinction between the plant and animal cells came into being. The mitochondria is unique in the sense that the organelle contains its own DNA which is derived from its parents. Naturally, as the mitochondria is responsible for the breakdown of organic molecules to release energy, this DNA was responsible for the reactions involved to do this. The remarkable thing about mitochondria is the striking similarity to that of a species of amoeba, where the structure of the two is similar. In this particular species of amoeba, symbiotic bacteria enact what the mitochondria do in more advanced cell structures. The emergence of mitochondria resulted in the end of such symbiotic relationships. The end of the symbiotic relationship no doubt increased parasitism due to the fact that cells now possess their own energy supply. They could be exposed and eradicated by the pathogens of the time. Although geological records for this period are sketchy to say the least, evidence suggests that organelles continued to diversify in this period, further differentiating the taxon that we use today to class them. The period during which the multicellular organisms began to emerge is called the Cambrian era. A good example of these are the sponges. These species who inhabited the Earth around half a billion years ago could grow up to 1 meter across, making this distinctively different from the previous unicellular organisms. This was the beginning of cell specialization into tissues, where particular tissues could perform functions to the well being of the organisms at large. If you segregated the cells of these multicellular organisms, one could see that each cell could live independently. One can also see that certain characteristics of an organism are imported by the genome of other organisms. One important event in time is the development of sexual reproduction. Before, when they were only unicellular organisms, reproduction took place by mitosis or cell division. Sexual reproduction caused the genome of the offspring to change rather than by just inheriting the genome of their parent. Now let us look into the primitive animals that came into being. 1. Worms. 2. Mollusks. 3. Coleantherids. 4. Echinoderms. All these primitive animals originated and lived in water. Then came the
Arthropods.
arthropods. The
The
arthropods
arthropods are
are 1. Crustaceans, insects of the sea. 2. Myriapods, millipedes and centipedes. 3. Arachnids, first to occupy dry land. 4. Insecta. A relationship between insects and plants, like insects depends on plants for nutrition and insects help in pollination, etc. Plants and insects have always had close relationship in evolution. While insects and similar organisms migrated towards land, there were many organisms left in the large ecosystem on Earth, the water. To ensure their long term survival, these organisms engaged in reproduction and genetic variation thus increased. This resulted in the arrival of the fishes. There are over 20,000 species of fish, all of which have diversified over time to aptly occupy a particular habitat. Since aquatic environments vary greatly in regards to its characteristics, fish diversity also varies greatly. The variation of the aquatic environment and thereby the diversity of the fishes depends on the following factors: 1. Temperature. 2. Salt water slash fresh water. 3. Biotic factors such as availability of food competition, etc. 4. Geological factors. Just like the insects and fishes, which were vertebrates, the amphibians, whose ancestors lived in water too, were vertebrates. Amphibians are typically characterized by their incomplete transition from water to land. They are a class of organisms that typically inhabit coastal areas or surrounding aquatic environments. The amphibians could live in both land and water due to the presence of both lungs and gills. The amphibians never made it completely on land, but their successors, the reptiles, made it. The amphibians were cold blooded, and so were the reptiles, but the latter could adapt more easily to land due to their waterproof skin and due to the shelled eggs which contain the young. At that time, reptiles migrated to land. Other plants and animals too did, providing a conducive environment for reptiles to exist. The amphibians and reptiles, when they died, made the soil fertile with the organic compounds created when their bodies were broken down. The fertile soil resulted in the facilitation of the growth of various plant species. This also initiated the migration of a great number of organisms from the water to the land. Then came the beginning of the Triassic period around 230 million years ago, during which dinosaurs emerged. Dinosaur is a Greek word meaning terrible lizard. During the beginning of the Triassic period, there emerged two types of dinosaurs. One was a reptile like and the other bird like. Within these two categories, they further diversified as carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. They were rather huge in size compared to any organisms before them. The herbivore dinosaurs were tall enough to graze the top of the big tree, which other herbivores could not. Then came the Jurassic period, during which the dinosaurs became bigger and stronger than their ancestors. One example is Tyrannosaurus rex, which was the largest carnivore at that time. Jurassic period witnessed the emergence of the pterodactyl, a pendactyl digitate organism that ruled the skies. I had mentioned before that long before the dinosaurs came to Earth, many organisms had migrated from the water to the dry land. When the dinosaurs were ruling the Earth, a species of organisms called the mammalia was slowly emerging in the background. It is the same class that man belongs to. Suddenly, about 65 million years ago, due to a major geological event like maybe an extraterrestrial body impacting the Earth, all the dinosaurs were in one instant wiped off from the Earth. Along with the dinosaurs, many other species of large organisms were wiped off from the face of the Earth. Subsequently, the ecological balance was disrupted, but organisms like the insects, birds, and marine life carried on due to the non relevance of the geological disaster on their day to day existence. Also, the mammals survived this major disaster and they continued to exist on land and trees. The humans come under the class Mammalia, that is, under the phylum Vertebrata. The word mammal came from the Latin word mamma, meaning breast. Around 300 million years ago, when the reptiles migrated to dry land, they acquired an ecological niche and they had literally no competition to face on land. As evolution took place, there began to exist an organism which was not purely reptile and not purely mammals, called the paramammals. The class Mammalia came into being from there. Thus, it is presumed by the scientists that the mammals originated from reptiles. It was around 65 million years ago that the dinosaurs were completely wiped off. The ecological niches they were occupying began to be taken over by the mammals. As I mentioned before, mammals existed alongside the dinosaurs. Also, another descendant of reptiles, the class aves, which are the birds, also existed, but they occupied the skies. At the time when the dinosaurs became extinct, the single continental mass called the Pangea had split into smaller land masses like the continents that we see now. This resulted in a change of the environment for different mammalian species, and the evolutionary pattern also began to change. A time even known as the Miocene epoch was the time when the continent of Eurasia, which included Europe and Asia, collided with the continent of Africa. It provided an opportunity for the mammals of both the continents to occupy each other's ecological niches and interbreed with each other. This increased the genetic diversity than previously existed before the Miocene epoch. With very less competition from fishes, birds, and reptiles, mammals continued to dominate the earth. Mammals even began to occupy the air and water in tandem with land, which was their main ecological niche. The early ancestors of humans were the hominids family. The hominids family come under the class Mammalia. The hominids diversified from apes nearly 6 to 8 million years ago. This event happened in Ethiopia in Africa. This was confirmed by the recovery of the skeleton of an hominid which scientists called the Lucy. Scientists believe that Lucy existed around 3 million years ago. The early hominids called the Australopithecines were the first to move away from the jungle into the open lands. This was probably because there was an intense competition in the jungle. But due to the fact that they were not evolved enough to fit into open land, they went back to the jungle. The most important characteristics of the Australopithecines was that they had a bipedal motion similar to humans. Australopithecines existed around 2 to 5 million years ago. The different types of Australopithecines are 1. Australopithecus afarensis. Second, Australopithecus africanus. 3. Australopithecus robustus. 4. Australopithecus boise. Around 2 million years ago, the brain size of the Australopithecines began to enlarge. They began to use simple tools to help them to live more and more easily. At this point of time, they were evolved enough to adapt to open land than their ancestors. This resulted in a new kind of hominids called the Homo species. The distinct advantage that the Homo species began to have over other animals was their tool using capability. The different types of Homo species are Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo erectus species is so named because these hominids could walk erect compared to their ancestors who had bipedal motion but did not walk erect. They also used tools. Remains of them is found in China. Homo sapiens means the wise man. They existed around 1.6 million years ago. Their brain size also was larger. They could easily adapt to the surroundings than the ancestors. Also, the Homo sapiens were the first to use wooden tools like the spears. The remains of the Homo sapiens were found mainly in the continents of Asia, Africa, and Europe. Subspecies of the Homo sapiens called the Homo sapiens neanderthalensis began to emerge from a quarter million years ago and continued to evolve around the year 30,000 BC. From the year 30,000 BC to the present day world, a new type of hominids called the Homo sapiens sapiens began to evolve. This species came after the Neanderthals man disappeared. In other words, the Homo sapiens sapiens is the modern man. This time period is when the ancient history of mankind begins. As we all know that the modern man had mastered almost everything. He has also manipulated the environment to suit his cause. The most important thing that modern man has done was to colonize all the habitable continents on planet Earth. He has done something that none of his predecessors could achieve. Today, he has also advanced into outer space. Thank you for listening. Please press the like and the share button, and if you like it, please also subscribe to this video. Thank you.